Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Strike, and I'm here with Manny Man.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Manny. So I think this is the first time you've been on the podcast. Maybe just give a quick rundown of who you are, what you do at ArtStation.
Yeah, Kevin, this is my first time on any podcast, so was really excited to do it. So my name is Manny. I'm a product manager here at ArtStation. I like talking to artists to get feedback on how we can improve ArtStation, and then, actually building those features to solve problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been a great addition to the team. You're really good at chatting with both the artists and studios, which you're doing right now as well, and helping us build the functionality. So yeah, thanks so much for your contributions.
Well, thank you. I'm really enjoying it here.
Okay, so this episode, a bonus episode of the podcast, we're hoping that it syncs up with the Art Blast that we'll run on ArtStation. We had a really fun conversation with both Jason Hickey and Gavin Goulden, both art directors that have been working on Spider-Man Miles Morales. And for those of you who don't know, this is the second in a series of Marvel Spider-Man that's been released for PS4 and PS5. Really fun conversation.
Yeah, they're really cool guys, and it was just awesome to hear the insights they had into how the game was made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed jumping right in at the beginning, chatting about what was it like when they find out they're going to be working on this new game, and at the time they were working on it, they were the first one in the series hadn't been released yet, so that was interesting. Talking about the challenges, influences from Spider-Verse film, yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and working on something like Spider-Man is just like a dream come true, just with that IP. Just hearing about how they work to make New York City just feel real and authentic. It was really cool to hear the process behind that as well.
Yeah, enjoyed that. Their career path was kind of interesting. So they both were lead artists that are now art directors, and for Gavin, working on a franchise that he's been dreaming about since he was a kid. It was fun to just hear about the journey that they took and how they see it, how it is working at Insomniac.
Yeah, just hearing about why they wanted to make the move, and just some of the help that they had along the way, and just how their career path progressed, and hearing about all the tips that they gave to new artists, or for someone who's thinking, hey, I want to work for something as awesome as Spider-Man, or I want to work at somewhere like Insomniac. How do I get there? Just hearing real tips from them, that was really cool.
Yeah, closing it out at the end with some of that for those that will be very interesting if you want to work on a franchise or at a specific studio. So some feedback for that, portfolio tips as well. That was really good. So yeah, the game is out already. The book is coming out at the Art of book is coming out in February. Also, as I mentioned before, we're hoping that this launches the same day as the Art Blast. But if not, you can always check out the Art Blast on an ArtStation magazine article. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Gavin, Jason. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you guys here and chatting virtually like this. All right, so right now on my screen, I have the Wikipedia page for Spider-Man Miles Morales. There are 4 names for artists, and 2 of them are your names. You guys have made it. This is this is it.
That's really accurate. Yeah. Right. Who are the other 2?
So we got Jacinda Chu, Gavin Goulden, Jason Hickey, and Grant Hollis. We've got 50% of the artists.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Those imposters.
Yeah.
So is that something did you guys know this? Is this something you can show your parents and they know that you've made it, you're successful now?
My mom has always believed I've been successful, so
it's a good mom.
She every decision I make, she's like, "That's the best idea ever." Even if half an hour later I say another decision, she's like, "That's the best idea ever." So
I think I still need to sell my parents on this whole video game thing as a career first, but after that, I'll show them Wiki.
Sounds good. All right, so let's get into chatting about the game. Maybe you can set the stage for us. So we've got Marvel Spider-Man. This is the second game in the Marvel Spider-Man series. What's it like on day one? What have you been tasked to do, and what's the biggest challenge that you see at that time?
I suppose the first thing is that day one was not the end day for the first Spider-Man. So we were working on CTNS and Spider-Man and this Miles Morales game at the same time. So I think the first thing was to try and figure out how do we do pre-pro in a short period with very few people and very, I think it was like I came on and then there was, Gavin was there and then there was maybe 2 environment artists, I think, in pre-pro, and that was it. There was no character VFX or lighting because everyone was working. So really we're looking at like what are the high level things we need to solve in pre-pro and then look at the pillars about, what are the big things that are going to be important for the game. And the first thing really was, how do we make it feel like Miles Morales it's his own city, it's his own game, it's his own story. And that was where we started, I think.
Setting out a plan on how we can move quick too, right? So knowing that we're going to have a smaller but more heavily collaborative team working on the project, how can we get ideas into the game fast? How can we start to build out that world that we know we're building for we're telling the story of for Miles Morales. So putting concepts into block out sculpts quicker for characters, getting our more unique sections for the environment set up and stood up for play it, see if it's fun, see if it makes sense really early on.
Were you worried about anything in particular, like it being the second in the series?
Well, I think that for me, I'm always worried basically about everything all the time. So yes, I was definitely worried at that point. It may not have been about the game. It could have been what's for breakfast. But when it comes to like the challenges that we saw, in terms of like, going from the first really successful at the time, we were hoping it was successful. And then how do we build on that? Because we didn't want to make the same game. I wanted the fans to love what was in the first game and do more of that, and then evolve stuff that we felt either we had already planned to do, but we didn't have time for the first game, or things that were like, we could have done something a bit different with that. But in terms of the things that I was personally most passionate about, was, so me and Gavin had different roles. We tried to split it. We worked together really closely, but we also tried to split it. And because I come from an environment art background, my thing was the world. Like, how do we make it his own world? So getting the winter thing was a big push. Setting it around the holiday season. And then thinking about the lighting and how we would push the color and stuff like that in the gameplay were the things that I was like, okay, I think we can make this game unique by doing these things. So when you say worry, it was more about like, how do we make it unique? Again, going back to that, we don't want to make a stamp, copy and paste version from Miles' story.
I was just saying the challenges that I would have, since it's more of my background's more character and cinematics, would be how do we give Miles his own identity? How do we make it feel as though it's part of the universe that we've built with the first Spider-Man, but also give Miles his own room and respect his character, right? And then how do we improve visually on the game itself? Like, the fidelity of the models, complexity of shaders, complexity of effects, lighting, and things like that, I think, if you play the game, it kind of speaks for itself that we've been able to improve on what we had, for sure. I think the team's really happy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're working on things like the the lighting or certain parts of the game, the art for the game, are you also looking at the movies themselves or comic books and pulling in influences from that? Just wondering if you're involving those as well.
Yeah, I think with any Spider-Man title, we tend to look at the past with an eye to the future, right? So you have to pay some sort of respect to the books, the movies, cartoons, all these different forms of media that we bring in to help influence what our Miles Morales is going to be. And obviously, especially with the suits, there's some fan service there, right? So bringing in our Into the Spider-Verse suit and the effects on that suit is like a big example of how we look at what somebody else has done and try to honor that in our own game.
With regards to looking at movie specifically with lighting, I would say we were looking at modern techniques rather than like a lot of the reference we actually use for, when we're referencing existing examples would be from films that have nothing to do with superheroes. So like we're not saying let's look at something from the MCU or Into the Spider-Verse or something else like that and then saying, right, we have to do a bit of that but with a splash of this. It was more like saying, okay, well the colorist from Drive is exceptional at portraying night. Can we use something about that? Or we looked at the lighting for its name escapes me. The TV series for Miles' Skin. Do you remember the name of that TV series we looked at?
Oh, it's Insecure.
Insecure, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. I mean, obviously not just that film, but that's the kind of thing that TV series. That's the kind of thing that we would draw inspiration from. And then we also, whether or not we succeeded is probably up to the players, people who didn't make it, but we were trying to give color and light its own personality within the game. I definitely think we could have done more, and we'll always be trying to do more, but that was another thing. Like, it wasn't just the light, right? It was like, these colors go with these characters, or these colors go with these themes, so you have your warmer colors for your family stuff. And you have, then you get really Marvel-y and you have purple when it's Tinker, or red when it's whatever other character. We did a color script early on, and Gav worked on it, and I have to say I have done color scripts before, but just like really, really rough and not really use them because I was like, I don't know. So if you actually look at any of the color script stuff that I did, it just looks like a child has gone into Photoshop and just put splodges down and go, what do you think? And Gav is able to understand things at a high level. So he was like, yeah, that seems okay.
I'm just good at sounding like I'm informed.
Perfect. No, you know, with the orange there.
So, I mean, that's interesting then. So like how, with the different art directors, how do you all work together then?
When you were talking about the Wikipedia, those are actually our 4 art directors. And on this project, it was Jason and I being teamed together. The way that we did it, like Jason was mentioning, is that we kind of split the tasks down based on our experience, and then kind of like what gravitates towards those areas, right? So Jason was more responsible for environment and then missions and gameplay, since it's more tied into that. And I was doing characters and cinematics, since it's usually very character heavy.
And then I would also say, Gav, that you were looking after most of the VFX, combat, because that's related to characters. My background from, both disciplines, character and environment, are heavily involved in the gameplay, but in different ways. So environment is very much, you've got to really understand how everything flows. So I was sort of more in those kind of missions, like how the beats work. We were all in them together as well, right? That let's be clear. Like, it wasn't like me and Gav were often, but we are on different sides.
Yeah, it's not like we were separated into different buildings completely. Is that like some outside force made us stay in different buildings for months and months and months?
My plan came together.
I can't imagine that.
No, nothing weird like that happened.
But yeah, so there was a lot of, but I think that there were some difficulties in splitting up some of the work sometimes, because you might have the effects that are heavily involved in a level and also heavily involved with the cinematics or the character pipeline, and it isn't smooth as silk, but it worked. I think we were able to give the focus, and both of us obviously the team worked harder than us, right? Let's be clear. We didn't do any of the stuff, or much of it. The team did that, but we did spend a lot of time reviewing stuff and giving feedback and trying to help the team get to where they want. And I just don't think either of us would have been able to do it effectively on our own. I know that there are superhero art directors who work maybe all the time or something. I don't know. Or maybe they drop the ball all the time and nobody notices. But I think that the setup we had was the right call. It made us able to focus on our things. I will say that we were sort of continuing what we were doing in the first Spider-Man game. It wasn't like, there was a lot of art direction done with Jacinda and Grant for characters that Gavin was pretty much spearheading. And then I was doing a lot of the environment stuff as well. Zach Adams was working there at the time and worked with him. But it was sort of a continuation of that role, if you know what I mean. It didn't just come out of nowhere, like somebody went, let's just throw these people at it. So I think that helped with the process.
In the cinematics, Gavin, were there specific parts of like the animation style that was in the movie that you tried to bring into the game as well?
No, we tend to go with what our animation directors and like I would say our house style has been, like going for more of the realistic interpretation. For some of the Spider-Man poses, like in gameplay or some key poses you get in cinematics, I think more it would be from comics that we all know and want to kind of pay respects to that, like a panel from like Sarah Pacelli or something like that. But yeah, for the most part, for animation, it would really be more of our traditional setup that we'd have.
Yeah, no, they did a lot of these reference again, like we were saying about the lighting. They were taking reference from athletic, sports. Mm-hmm. As much. I mean, you could say like surfing poses or acrobatic poses or skateboard poses or, hip hop, breakdance, whatever, would all be probably as well as the comics. Like, I don't think the movies there might be we might use them as like, hey, this action sequence has these nice beats and things, and maybe we could have a tempo similar. But again, it might not even be from a superhero film. It might be from,
Yeah. We actually had one of our animators, James Ham, filmed himself doing, I don't know how to explain it, dude. If I tried any of this stuff, my back would shatter into a million pieces. But he did like, dives into like pits and like kind of parkour kind of stuff for his own reference for miles.
With spikes.
Yes, that's what's in the other room. Yeah, this is actually all of just a Zoom screen.
Yeah,
you don't want to see what's behind me.
Prince of Persia old school traps that he's trying to avoid.
Yeah, totally.
Did you also do some trips, like some field trips to New York for the environments, or even during the wintertime? Yeah,
mentally, I
mentally,
I was there. Yeah, it was beautiful Christmas in New York. No, we didn't actually. It's something that we were always like, we need to do. But I don't think, whilst it would be lovely, it isn't necessary, I think, because a lot of people who worked on the game have lived in New York. That's for short periods. It's actually not a huge amount of New Yorkers, but there are definitely people who've lived there, I myself included.
Yeah.
And then we had a lot of reference, gathering. We did have the creative director went out there, and a few other people went out there as field trips, but on like more to visit relatives or things like that. I would say where we spent our most time, rather than the winter thing, was on cultural, getting the right culture for Spanish Harlem. We had a team with Sony that went up there and talked to people and asked, for like Spanish coaching, checking our dialogue, checking the kind of propping, checking the kind of music that people who live in New York from Puerto Rican or an African American descent. The kind of things that they would expect to see in their community represented effectively. So I think that's probably the biggest research gathering we did. There was quite a lot of back and forth on that. That was something new to me. I hadn't. So we didn't actually talk individually face to face, but the Sony team did, and we got to see all the video footage of the people giving us feedback about stuff, which was really useful. We never went into this going, yeah, it's just Peter Parker that looks different. Like, that's just absolutely not what the character is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from, day one, we always wanted to tell Miles Morales' story, right? Like that it wasn't Peter Parker with a different costume on or something. So in order to do that, we tried to take as many steps as possible to make sure that we honored that and did it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even if it wasn't, that wasn't already part of the lore, we were trying to get deeper into making this Miles' story. And in order to do that, one of the things we had pillars that changed. At one point, it was like it's Miles' New York, where's Miles' city. So what does that mean? Right, Peter's swinging around, the high levels, the big skyscrapers. He's been there for a long time. Maybe the city he thinks it is not what it is anymore. Anyone who's lived in New York knows how quickly things could change there in terms of the culture. But for Miles, this is just like he's not even a new like he's not a Manhattan kid, right? He's from Brooklyn, right? So he comes here to live, and he starts to see what the city is from his own point of view. And in order to be able to tell that story, we had to have an authentic story to tell. Otherwise, even if it wasn't personally important to us as a development team, you couldn't have told the story without that representation. And then I don't know, sorry, this is a little bit philosophical, but I felt like I was sort of going through the same process as Miles in terms of coming to know East Harlem. Because when I started, I had this idea. And then as we researched more and more, we were discovering more things about like murals and music and barbers and how important barbers are, and just the evolution of East Harlem from where it used to be to where it is now, and so it was a cool learning experience as well for me. I'm definitely going to go on vacation there if we're ever allowed to ever again.
Well, we should go together. Like, New York is not so far from here.
Well, you need to get rid of that thing on your face.
Oh yeah, my pandemic beard. Yeah. I want to ask about.
It peels off.
Yeah, it's just.
It's just a Zoom background. It's. I want to ask about PS5 because that's pretty exciting, and this being a launch title. Like, what was particularly fun or exciting for you guys working with the new hardware? What were you able to do with it that was fun?
Mm-hmm. So for me, the most exciting parts is our fast loading due to the SSD. So being able to, again, character background, I want to put as much detail into things as I possibly can. So being able to load into that immediately was awesome, right? Like, so basically no more loading screens, just kind of getting right into the pretty art. Then of course we have all of our technology that we've added for PS5 on the character side. So we have strand-based hair now, our 4D rigs for all of our faces. Again, improved models, improved texture shaders. Getting like our ray trace reflection set up was awesome. Like the minute that turned on, it was like, I think you kind of see what next gen is when you look at that, right? So you're looking at this.
Do you remember the first?
Like a night.
Do you remember the first demo? And I think this Abdul is one of our amazing Frederick programmers, and he did a ray tracing on Spider-Man's eye. like the glass in the eye. So he had the video and we were like, what? And then zoomed right in and you can see like the whole world reflected in the eye. We're like, ah!
I was like, oh, there it is.
Then we had some jumps to go because after that there was like, it was reflecting the cars and the people, but not the ground and things. We're like, this reflection looks slightly off, you know. So there was bumps. Just to build on the ray tracing thing, though, I think it was really exciting to see not just the fact that we could do it, but the process of going from is it doable to we're doing it at this quality, and then also being able to design locations and stuff and cinematics based off that technology. You know, like, oh, this would look really way better if we set it in this kind of environment. That was really good. Sorry, Gav, continue.
No, that's good. Yeah, I mean the addition of 60 frames per second too is pretty amazing to play. You know, I was kind of used to the 30 frames, kind of like switching back and forth between it, but it's really slick and it's a lot of fun to play with.
Mm-hmm. Exciting. I'd like to transition a little bit and talk to you guys about your career path, because you've both gone from being lead artists to art directors. Maybe you can just explain a little bit about that journey.
Sure. So for me, I was a character artist for, I think, 16 years or so before officially becoming art director. The way it kind of worked for me is that I was sort of an acting art director on our Spider-Man DLC, CTNS, See That Never Sleeps, and kind of like working with the team on those smaller, pieces for the game, and then transitioning into Miles. It's definitely a different world for me, but one that I'm definitely excited about for sure. You kind of like work with different departments, side by side when you're working on character stuff. So be like rigging or animation effects or lighting for me. Then having to have a different view of the project versus just like what's your team up to? Like what is your, what are the artists on your team up to day to day kind of thing versus like what's happening in the project is definitely a big change of pace for me. I mean, it's awesome, but it's just it's kind of a different perspective for sure.
Yeah, for me it was pretty similar. I had done art direction on other projects, but it was called something, it was different. It was like a lead artist when I was at Crytek, but there was only the one and there was no real art director. So I kind of did some art direction there, but once you have the kind of responsibility for the game on your shoulders and it's sort of official, it does change things a little bit because you end up, you're in those marketing discussions, for example. It's like, okay, well, what are we going to, create? How are we going to, what kind of trailers or what are we going to do for the credits or things like that? That's a very different side of it. There's also the, when I was doing the art direction before, it was very much like, okay, well, we have a certain amount of time and we have all these problems to fix, and it was very much like too much stuff and trying to put everything back in the pot, whereas when you start on the project and you're going all the way through, you can get rid of a lot of that overboiling. I mean, obviously you still make mistakes, or there still is very challenging things to do, but you're not like I felt like I was only a little bit behind all the time instead of like really far behind. But since I've really enjoyed art direction, I enjoyed it. Probably the job I enjoyed the most that I've done in my career. And I think that for me, it was like a lead. I was senior artist or whatever, before, and then a lead, and eventually an art director. But the transition was, I think Insomniac was the best place for me to have the transition, because I got there's a really good policy of mentorship, and you're brought along the way. You're not just like okay, we don't have an art director, you're the art director, and just like, it was built up, and I think we were. I don't know how you felt, Gab, but I mean, it doesn't always feel like this, but I think we were set up to succeed. We certainly weren't set up to fail. So I think, it was a good place to have it. And then like, I mean, how lucky to be on this title as an art director, as your credit. It's like, PS5 launch title, Spider-Man, Miles Morales, art director. Yeah. So there's the fate smiled on us, I think, a little bit as well. But yeah, it's been really fun. Like, it is working with a whole new set of people in a different way. I think this is the biggest change. Although I will say, for anyone who is an artist who's in their career, who's watching, every time you change position, like a promotion, your job changes dramatically. And I think people think that, like, sometimes I'm an associate artist, when I'm an environment artist, people will, I don't know, respect me more. And that's all. It's like, no, now you have more responsibilities. And then a senior, it's like, now you have even more responsibilities, and you have to mentor people, and you have to do all this stuff. And like,
that art directors just kind of sit around and, eat lobster and drink wine all day and just tell people what to do. Like, no.
It's not that.
No. Well, I mean, like, you can't get lobster in LA, but just besides that,
I got a big jar of jelly lobsters that I poured. Then as you go through the lead, then things change completely when you become a lead. And I would say the transition from lead to art director is maybe less different than senior to lead, in a way. I mean, you're doing more of the same stuff, as depending on the kind of lead. Right, so some leads in some studios would be more managerial, like more career growth and schedules, and sort of like a PM, a project manager type of thing. And then other leads will be more the total other end, which is like the principal kind of guru status, where people sit in a corner and they research new tech. And with the tech team, and ours is more in the middle, I think. Gav, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Sorry, when did you guys realize that you wanted to, become art directors, and you were interested in it?
I'll be honest. For me, I didn't think it was a possibility, because all of the art directors that I had coming up through my career were always concept or environment artists. So it's not until recently where I've seen other character artists that are around my experience level, or a bit before me or something, become art directors, and I'm like, oh, if it's possible, like, I'd love to be able to do that, right? Like, obviously, speaking with ArtStation, Raf Grassetti, who's a friend of mine, his work is always on the front page. I think he's like one of those people that were like kind of going in that direction, and is definitely an influence on me for sure. But I think, like, it's always kind of been a dream, right? It's great to be able to work with other departments, work with other, like, other teams to try and build, like, stories and worlds to, like, a bigger scale,
Well, that's curious. Why do you think that is about that transition? Do you think there's just more appreciation for a character and for the characters?
I mean, I'm honestly not too sure. I mean, maybe there's something along how a concept is changing to sculpture now. There's a lot of, like, overlap between 3D artists and concepts. So there is, I think, more input from character artists to how things look in the game. Whereas before, it used to just be like 2D, you throw it over the fence and somebody models it out, and they spend weeks noodling over verts, and edge flow, and then that's it. You know what I mean? But I think that's changed recently in the past few years.
I would say it's not like an appreciation issue. Like, obviously, from my experience, the character teams have always been, vital. However, I think the fidelity of characters is much more, well, it's front and center. Before, it was always front and center, but more for about, like, coolness, like it looks cool and you can identify it and stuff. Last generation and obviously this generation, you're looking at characters with close to realistic emotional response, and you're not relying on just the lighting or an environment to get that emotional response. You're looking for it in the character. And then the second thing is, as the games get bigger and more expensive, this is just theories, right? But we're outsourcing, more across the board. We work with our partner studios, and often leaders in the character will be giving feedback to people, and there will be art directing people, great artists that aren't in the studio, and they'll need to understand the everything about the game in order for them to be able to give the right feedback. So it's more it's more that it's more part of it's not every day, but it's the art direction is a part of the job now more than maybe in the past it was. And I think that the skills of communication and the ability to express a vision is what is looked for, and also to help get the team rallied behind an idea is what you need as an art director. It's not like which background you come from. And as Gavin suggested, is the art team has to work with, every art department has to work very close with a lot of different teams. So it isn't just we do our stuff really well and that's it. I mean, character artists, we do our stuff really well with hundreds of other people. So you have to be able to lead in a way other teams, even if you're not directly leading them, which is again, like for me, if I was to go in and start leading art directing the character team, with more input. Say if me and Gavin were working on the same project together, I would be leaning heavily on the lead artist and the lead character artist and other people to help me get my knowledge up. And the same that Gav might find in another discipline that he hasn't been an expert in. But being able to lead other teams that you don't necessarily know exactly how they work is other experience that you get as a lead character artist, maybe more so than in the past. But it is speculation. I think the emotional element of the characters and how important they are in the scenes is probably the biggest. You're getting these big Sony IPs and they're revolving around that one character and their journey. So we have to get it right.
And like the technical understanding of how our rigs work, how important like deformation, anatomy, and stuff is in games these days. And for me too, like for I guess going back to the question of when did I realize I wanted to be an art director? Keep in mind when I started my career, there wasn't even character artist as a role, right? So, knowing I wanted to make characters, but at that time it was just artist, and sometimes you get to make a monster every once in a while, but for the most part you're making, weapons or shoes or something like that, right? So I think it kind of, I've learned what I wanted the more I've worked in the industry, for sure.
Yeah, for me, I would say careful what you wish for along your career path. I do like what I'm doing now. That's definitely the best. But my sort of, I entered, the first time I thought about art direction was when Gary McGinty, who's an art director in film. I used to work with him in animation way back 2005 to 2008 or something. So we're doing ArchViz and that kind of stuff. And he said, I think that you would be a great art director one day. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll aim for that then. And then, went into game. I didn't know what field it was going to be. And he said, already worked in games for a bit. It wasn't what I was looking for. And then I went back in and found more of what I wanted when I worked in at Frontier in Cambridge in the UK. And then really there, it was, I'll have to be honest, I'm not sure if other artists struggle with this, but there's always this feeling that I'm doing the best I can, but maybe it's not great. And I've luckily had lots of people who've said, no, that is great, or it is good, believe in yourself, whatever. So that's pushed me. So like at Frontier, I was there a year and a half and they made me a senior artist. And I was like, and then they gave me some lead stuff, and then Crytek was a senior, and then I became a lead. And then that's when I started first doing actual sort of art direction-ish, and I really enjoyed that part, working with concept and then working with external vendors. But it was sort of an ongoing, I'd like to be an art director one day, but I didn't really know what it was. I knew what it was. Like, there's a person who decides stuff and they make pictures with people, but I didn't know what it was at all. So I didn't know what I wanted. I just thought somebody suggested that title, so I'll try it. When I say be careful what you wish for, is that sometimes, and we talked about it briefly earlier, the career jump that you make, you really research what you're getting into before you get into it. Unless you're just like gung ho and see what it is, because like the lead, I feel like I jumped out of environment art too early. I probably could have spent another 2 or 3 years in environment art and then moved into a lead, and I think that would have been a good amount of time. But because I was sort of aiming for this lead thing, I just skipped a couple of things that I think it would have been good for me to learn or spend more time on. So it isn't always like a race to the end. It's that journey and learning as you go and building up that patience and sort of expertise as you go in your field. And when you feel like, okay, I have a really good handle on this, I'm ready to make the next step. Not like, okay, I'm kind of getting it done and it's good. Okay, what's next? Don't go too fast sometimes.
Understanding the fundamentals, like that's how you'll be a better leader in the future.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas I just have to wing it now because I missed all that. I'm like, Gav, what do I do now?
You're asking the wrong guy. I've been faking it for years.
There's some artists that like that dream about working like in a specific franchise or series. What do you say to them when they come and ask you for advice? Like, if they've been fans of Spider-Man or Star Wars or these other things, like, and they come to you, what kind of advice do you give them?
Well, as a lifelong Spider-Man fan, who is that person that actually got to work on his, a game for his childhood hero, go for it. I mean, that's what I would say. Like, I mean, to be honest, I think, I've got to work on a lot of things that I really admired before I, actually got to work on it. And, it can happen, but at the same time, if you're an artist trying to get into the industry, it takes time. It might not be your first job is working on the thing that you love and you knock it out of the park immediately. Like it can be a climb that you might have to, be patient until good things come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I second that. I think that when you have these studios like Insomniac or, Bloody Dogs, Santa Monica, Sucker Punch or whatever, there's a lot of people who want to work at those studios. And if you're fresh and you have no experience, it's going to be challenging. Now, again, you go for it, great if you can. There are people who do it, but also, expect that's going to be a lot of hard work and it may not come together. But there's the other part is there are plenty of studios. Insomniac was a small studio once, and there's people who've been here since the beginning and are working on the Spider-Man games and stuff from PS5. So it isn't always just the big powerhouses that are the places to go to and work on that IP. The second thing is that, and this is just anecdotal, I don't know anything about other Spider-Man games or who made them or whatever. I'm just saying that you could go to work on a Spider-Man game, for example, or like Incredible Hulk or whatever. And the game is okay or good or terrible, but the experience is awful, right? So be careful, like make sure that you're trying to work in studios that have a good, that treat you well, and that you can learn well and you can not like burn out. I remember in the mid 2000s when I was looking at the burnout rate in America for games, the average was 3 to 5 years and people would leave the industry forever. It was really bad. I don't know if it's probably much better now, but it's, it just gives you an idea of like, it isn't just the IP that you should be looking at. you should be looking at, like, I for example, I didn't come to Insomniac Games for Spider-Man, although I'm so happy I actually came because I saw a GDC talk. Jacinda did a GDC talk. Jacinda Chu, who we talked about earlier, the studio art director. And the way she talked about game development and about involving artists all the way through, and work-life balance, and it just was inspiring to see, okay, well, there is another way of working from games. And it was sort of like Gavin said with character, I'm less up to date, so I didn't know how many environment artists had made it into art direction, but I had thought at the time that it was only concept artists who got into art direction. So I saw, and I was like, I actually went up to talk to her and asked, so what, I think you said it, but did you actually come from environment art, like environment art, building environments? She was like, yeah, I did. And I was like, oh, great, so did I. So do I. And then, here I am working on these amazing things. But I will also say that I don't really mind what the project is anymore. Once you do ship one or two titles, it's the way it's put together, the team that you work with. Like Jess Reed was the lead project manager for Miles, and the way she put the team together and the way we worked and the iterations we did through production was really like exceptionally well run, which was a great experience on its own, even if we were making Jason and Gav and Buy Burgers the game or something. Like it was a good experience, right? So
can't believe you let that slip.
Oh no, yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah. You guys signed an NDA, right?
An NDA.
Yeah, that's pretty inspiring for everybody. Yeah, and the different career paths we take, how we get there, and where we end up. We didn't even realize that. Any portfolio tips like that you would have for people, that common mistakes or things, especially maybe in the context of like, hey, I want to work on Spider-Man someday, or I want to work at Insomniac?
I'll have a short answer. I think, you look at the people who work in the place that you want to work at, and you have to do a portfolio that's as good as that portfolio or better. That's the simple way of doing it. Now, you could be lucky and you could get in, on a shorter contract or something like that. But I think that generally your portfolio has to be as good as the people who work there. So I think there's a misconception sometimes, and I'm not going to be too harsh about this, but we're not a school, right? You don't come to a game studio and then you don't know how to make a game, and then we train you. We train you how we work, and we like to mentor people and make them better, help them get to where they want to go. But you can't just come in and go, okay, I've done 3 textures and one crate. How do I make a gun? It's like, well, we're not going to teach you that. We don't have the time, So I think that just make sure you're understanding what the role is and have a portfolio that demonstrates that. And if you don't know what the role is, do try and reach out. The world is more open than it used to be. You can definitely find someone in the games industry who's working and contact them and ask them about what their day-to-day stuff is, especially if you can now, navigate your way to somebody who works in the studio you want to work for. The second thing I'd say is try to not have any plagiaristic. Don't steal. Otherwise, you could get in more trouble than not getting hired. And surprisingly, that does happen. Yeah, and if you can get to know anyone, and if you are working somewhere, just keep working, keep being a good person, and don't be a bad person.
Weird. I was going to say the opposite.
Yeah, because the more positive relationships you have, the more you'll get a job. All my jobs I got in my career, I got because I knew someone who worked there, except for Insomniac. It's the only place. So I knew someone. They told me there was a job going up, or they recommended me, or something like that. And that's all from previous places I worked at. in fact, the only reason I applied for Insomniac was because I had a friend who I told him I wanted to work here after I went to see the GDC talk. And I joked that if there was ever a job come up for a lead there, I'd apply. I didn't even pay attention, and he used, was always looking for stuff. So he sent me the link, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I have to apply now. Here's a joke application, and then I ended up with the job. So it also in that way, it was sort of a person pushing me that I worked with. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would say for artists making their portfolio, trying to get into the industry, you finish your work. There's a lot of portfolios we get that are like props that aren't part of an environment. It's not telling a story. It's not like compelling. For characters, having many T-posed gray sculpts in a portfolio, especially applying for a games company, bringing that to finish. So taking that sculpt, making it a great looking thing in Marmoset or Unreal, posing it, making the materials read properly. I would say make it easy to hire you as well. So removing all extra clicks, all noise. So if you want to be a character artist, don't have a car, don't have something that's mediocre, just because you took a class, they showed you how to make props, they showed you how to make an environment, and then you kind of have all of your classwork in your portfolio. So really focus on what you want to do and show that. So don't worry about if it's only 2 pieces, as long as it's really good. It's good 2 pieces. That's all that really matters. And I guess the final thing would be that there's no golden path. Like I think there's I get asked a lot by artists on how to get in the industry, how to get like the job that I had, how to break in. And I feel like there's an expectation that if you follow what one of us did, then it's going to work out. But that's not the case. Like the way my career started is a lot different than most people. So I I wouldn't recommend doing what I did. But also it's like, it might not have worked for you. It might've been time and who I knew and like what I did at the time and kind of the choices that I made. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And I think just, believing in your own work, staying at it, and just always trying to be better, listening to feedback. That's, the one true way of doing it, but there's no, checkbox for how to get in.
Yeah, I'd say like as well, just building on that is there are smart, you have to be smarter now. So because everything's sort of easier and everything's sort of harder because of that. So when me and Gav started, it was like, I don't know, for me, I was like I think I sent a CD with my work on it to the studio. I think that's what it was. And it was in a letter, with a cover letter, with cover letters, made it like people read cover letters. I mean, I promise I read all your cover letters. I promise, every single one. So make sure you put kind regards down the bottom. Otherwise, no job.
Just regards.
Yeah, just
kind regards.
Yeah, kind regards. Yeah. Otherwise,
it's also to whom it may concern, not to who it may concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or to you. You can just put to you. Yeah. That's fine as well. I would say that be smart. So like, I actually talked to some students recently who were doing PhD or, master's type. Basically, they've done degrees of different things like architecture and all sorts of other things. And I said the same thing to them as I'll say to whoever's listening or watching, is that you have to kind of grow up a bit and understand what you want. And it doesn't mean that you have to understand, I want to be a character artist at a AAA, place doing outsourced feedback 75% of the time and 25% making guns, right? It doesn't have to be like that, right? You have to just think, what do I like to do? And what do I want to do? Right. And again, it's not even just character art. It's like, could be, or environment art, it could be the process. I really like doing details. I really like doing the start part where you just block it all out and you imagine it and I really like working with lots of people and collaborating and doing more designy sort of stuff. Like, just think about the processes that you like to do, and that will help you find a role. Because I do think that once you decide to be a character artist or environment artist for VFX, it starts to get easier, because then you can just focus your portfolio. Whereas if you're like, I want to be in games as an artist, you have to be smarter than that, because you're not going to be able to make a good portfolio. I do see that a lot from, like, the very good students will have picked one discipline already, and it's clear from their portfolio right early on. Don't waste time doing things that you're not going to, that you really like. If you don't want to do VFX, I don't think you should be putting VFX into your reel, into your portfolio. Yeah, I really don't. I mean, maybe there's, like Gavin says, there's no golden path for this. So maybe that is a really good way of getting into an indie studio, to show like a wider range of skills. But if you want to be in AAA, just know what kind of process you like, and then narrow it down. And then if you're struggling to get a job, think about other ways to get to that job. Like, if you can't get to be an environment artist at Insomniac Games, what could you do? What would get you closer to that? And maybe that's a 15-year plan. And you think of the next job you get. Well, I'm going to work here for, first of all, I could work there forever, because it might be great. But if it doesn't work out, I'm going to get this set of skills, and I'm going to do this kind of work. And then that's going to open up possibilities in this sphere. Just be smart about it, It's less nowadays. It's less sort of trundle along and hope you land in the job. I think it needs to have a bit of focus, and you'll get there. But I will say a shout out to outsource. People look down at outsource still. I still get people who look down at the outsource artist role, which is a person who works in the studio who gives art direction feedback to outsource assets and outsource deliveries. It's basically an art direction role, at a lower level, and it's a really good way to get into the industry, because lots of people don't even apply for it, because they sort of have this old-fashioned view of, oh, well, I'm not making all the art myself, therefore it has no value, which, you're basically seeing in some cases 95% of the assets that go into the game that you have a hand in. So if you're a good enough artist, but you can't quite land the job that you want for whatever reasons, just unlucky with hiring times, so do consider the outsource route. Mm-hmm. It's a good route. A lot of artists I worked with in outsource have gone on to do other things, or they've gone on to be leads or art directors in outsource, which is just as good. If I was to start again, I would go through outsource. That's what I would do.
Is it important for like a newer artist to have like a group of artists maybe at the same skill level that they can give feedback to and motivate? Is that helpful? And did you guys have that?
Yeah, at least for the character team, I think the effects team is set up this way as well. That we have for our hiring, we tend to have like a range of different skill levels, right? So there'll always be, entry-level artists, mid-level, senior, then leads, kind of all giving each other feedback. So there's always opportunity to mentor, and there's always opportunity to learn from, be a mentee, I suppose, and like learn from someone else on the team. So there's usually somebody at your level that you can bounce ideas back and forth with. But there's always kind of a structure set up that gives you like a path to grow as an artist, but also gives you somebody that's there for you to help you grow as well.
Yeah, it's like we're formalizing that kind of classroom dynamic where there's one really amazing person and everyone wants but I think that in our studio we basically live and breathe on like feedback. So like if you I can't take feedback, I'll be honest, I'm terrible at feedback. Somehow I managed to get where I am because I joined at a time when people didn't think that was important, I guess. Being able to give and take feedback is the most important thing, being humble about your work, but also knowing when to push, for what you believe in. If you're not getting and giving that and taking that feedback throughout your journey, like what you're just going to start on day one in your job and somebody goes, Oh, I really like what you did here with that use of green, but the model itself and the texture is just not working. You need to start again. But I like your enthusiasm. You're going to have to. You're going to have to be able to take, and it's not harsh. It's just like what's best for you and for the project and stuff. But so, yeah, I'm not sure if this was your question, but having a group of people in your community who can push you on. I wouldn't say at your same skill level. I'd say like find the best person you can get in touch with and hold yourself to their standards at minimum, and then keep evolving that. So if you start to reach that standard, it's not like you're not friends, right? But you need to, it's work. So you need to keep pushing yourself.
I do think there's something to, if you're a student, posting your work on ArtStation or Twitter or something like that, does open up a different reality for you. Because if you're in school, you've been surrounded by your friends, and they're probably they don't have the same perspective as somebody like me or somebody in the industry or something like that, or somebody who has nothing to lose and they'll just be completely brutally honest with you. Mm-hmm. I think having that different perspective helps you grow for sure. But I also think there's something to processing feedback, right? Like just because somebody says something doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't, if you had a different intent and you get feedback that's kind of conflicting with that, it doesn't mean that you have to listen to it. It doesn't mean that somebody posting online is more right than you are, So I think there's something to getting that feedback and learning to distill it and take what you want from it to improve.
Yeah, like that trust. You need to be able to trust that the person is coming from the right place, I think. Because, like you said, Gav, if you post something on Twitter and X-bot nasty, whatever, 67 decides to say, that's the worst thing I've ever seen in the history of everything. I mean, that's not going to be it's not great feedback.
Yeah. It's weird, man. I get Manny Man 44 is always just like, what is this?
And you're like, really the worst thing?
Yeah, the worst thing you've ever seen? How is it that everything I post is the worst thing you've seen?
Go back to the first post. It's actually okay.
Yeah, it was a picture of my dog.
It's now not as bad as what you just posted. How come trolls don't do that? How come they don't go back and
retroactively? Sorry. That was okay.
But it is super important to be getting feedback from people who not just friends and your parents who are going to say what you do is great, but and your close friends, but those that
my mom is right.
Yeah, except for your mom. Yeah, she seems to be onto something. But getting the feedback so you can improve, get better, and then get the job to do what you want. All right, good. So thanks so much for your time, guys. Before we go, people can make sure to follow you. You both have great ArtStation pages. Lots of great work there. You're both on Twitter. Gavin's also on Instagram, seems to post there. Anything else you want to say in closing, or what people should how people can reach out to you? Or
thanks for having us. And no other ways of reaching me, but Twitter and ArtStation are the usuals.
Yeah, I'd say find other people as well. There's a lot of great artists at Insomniac who will have more relevant career path history maybe than we have. We can give you advice on what we look for, but it won't be the most relevant way to get into the industry. I think that's something that I struggle with giving feedback on. So just find it, reach out to those more newer upcoming artists and get info from them. And if there is any students out there, there's an internship that we do for most departments, art departments and other departments every year. You have to be a student to apply, so just check the terms and conditions or whatever. But we have a really good rate of hiring our interns, and we have had really, really good interns in the past, and we expect to continue to do that. So apply.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there is Insomniac has a page on ArtStation posting all the latest jobs at Insomniac. So please check that out. Buy the game too. It's available now. I'm sure you've been inspired by what we've been talking about. So buy it, and it looks amazing. Play the game. Help support these guys, and to help more games be developed like that. And then there's also the Art of book that's coming out in February that I noticed. You can pre-order that on Amazon, so that's what I'm going to do. Thanks so much, guys.
Kevin, I gotta ask one more question. I gotta ask about Spider Cat. so what are the details? Like, how did what was the idea behind it? And I need some background details about that.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's probably one of the most organic, collaborative ideas that came together. Basically, if I remember right, we were setting up a side mission where you'd have to rescue a cat. I think the designer spoke with one of our consultants for New York, and they pointed out like the bodega cat being kind of a staple, right? Then it just kind of like one thing led to another. It's like, well, we should call it Spider-Man to kind of tie into how the neighborhood sees, Peter Parker's Spider-Man, you know what I mean? It's not Miles yet. And then kind of coming full circle into Miles Morales being the Spider-Man of Harlem, right? So, and then of course, making a suit as a reward is like my go-to. So yeah, it was really like a lot of tagging. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, we should make a mission. It should be a cat. It should be Spider-Man. Okay, you should you should have it in a backpack. It's like, okay, then you should have a suit that always has the cat in the backpack. Then the animators are like, we should have finishers just the cat. Yeah, so it's just kind of this like this layer cake of great things that were happening. Like everyone's obviously a lot of cat fans at Insomniac too.
What I think was great about it is without the spider. Like I remember when it was just a cat, and I was like, what? You're rescuing a cat, really? Like, this seems like we could do better. Yeah. And then it became the spider cat, and you're like, oh, okay, let's go.
Just like, okay, it's like, just like dragging a Spider-Man mask over top of a cat, and you're like, okay, I'm in now.
left.
So there it is.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. See you.
See you on ArtStation.com, the global hub for creative professionals. You've been listening to the ArtStation Podcast. Hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And please leave a rating and review for the podcast. We promise we'll read them all. See you next time.
I think it was good. I don't think I did any swearing.
No.
Which is incredible.
It's kind of weird for me. It's a little off-brand, but whatever. If you can just bleep a few like totally normal words. I kind of got a reputation that I need to. I'm a little foul-mouthed, so it's a little weird.
Yeah, you could do the bit when I say you should treat me a good person, and instead of bad person, you can just and then have cut to Gav.
Gav said something about I would have said the opposite, so I could say I would have said the